Does the chair only vote to break a tie? Well, yes and no. This is actually a myth in parliamentary law, but it is really close to an actual rule. So in this video, we will cover the actual rule. By the end of the video, I'll also cover the two situations where the chair can always vote, regardless of how close the vote is. But before we get into whether or not the chair can vote to break a tie, we need to understand what actually happens when there's a tie vote on a motion. For example, let's say a motion is made and seconded that $100 shall be donated to the ABC Foundation. After debate, this motion is put to a vote. Now, a majority vote is required to adopt this motion, and let's say the result of the vote is 21 in favor and 21 opposed. The vote is tied. And just to be clear, this is the vote total without the chair's vote, so the chair hasn't voted at this point. So my question here is, does this tie need to be broken? Absolutely not. There's a popular myth floating around that a tie has to be broken, that somehow a tie creates a deadlock that must be unlocked to move forward. This has even grown into another myth that it's better to have an odd number of members on a board or committee to avoid ties. I completely annihilate that myth in another video that you can watch by clicking here. But let's get back to the question. Why doesn't this tie need to be broken? Well, because for a motion to be adopted by a majority vote, it must receive more votes in the affirmative than in the negative. When there is a tie, the motion simply hasn't achieved the necessary threshold for adoption, because it hasn't received more votes in the affirmative than the negative. So a tie vote on a motion is lost, just the same as if the vote had been 0 to 42. There's no need to break a tie. The motion is simply lost, and in this case, $100 will not be donated to the ABC Foundation. But what about the chair's right to vote? Does the chair lose that right just because he's presiding? No, absolutely not. If the chair is a member of the assembly, the chair has the right to vote, but the chair only exercises that right in certain situations. And this is to preserve the appearance of impartiality that is necessary while presiding. This means there are instances where the chair can vote when a tie is involved. And believe it or not, it depends on which way the chair wants to vote. The chair cannot vote against the motion when the vote is tied, but the chair can vote in favor of the motion. I know that sounds crazy, but let me explain. Robert's Rules of Order provides, the presiding officer, if a member of the assembly, can, but is not obliged to, vote whenever his vote will affect the result. Notice that it says, if a member of the assembly. That's an important point to keep in mind. You don't get a vote just because you're presiding. For example, as a professional parliamentarian, I sometimes preside at clients' meetings. And since I'm not a member of the client's organization, I don't get a vote in the meeting. Now, most of the time the presiding officer is a member of the assembly, and that's the only reason the presiding officer gets a vote. But when exactly can the presiding officer exercise that vote? Let's take a look. Let's say the vote is 21 in favor and 21 opposed. At this point, with these vote totals, what would the outcome be? Well, the motion is lost because it does not have a majority in the affirmative. So if the chair voted against the motion, making it 21 to 22, what would the outcome be? Well, the motion would still be lost. So in this case, would the chair's vote affect the result? No, it would not. So can the chair vote? No. But what if the chair wanted to vote in favor of the motion? That would make it 22 to 21. In that case, we would have a new result. The motion would actually be adopted. So in this case, we see that the chair's vote would affect the outcome, so the chair can vote. We see here that the chair can vote in favor of a tied motion because his vote changes the outcome from being lost to actually being adopted. Now, let's say the vote is 16 to 15, not a tie. From this vote total, we see that the motion would be adopted because there are more votes in favor. But what if the chair wants to vote against the motion? That would make it 16 to 16. Here the chair actually created a tie. And what did this do to the outcome? It actually gives us a new result, going from adopted to lost. So in this case, the chair's vote would affect the result. Therefore, the chair can vote. But what if the vote total is 16 to 15 and the chair wants to vote in favor of the motion? Well, adding another affirmative vote to a motion that would already be adopted obviously would not affect the result. So the chair cannot vote in this situation. So if the chair does want to vote in one of these situations where his vote would affect the result, how exactly does he do that? That's a great question. I'm glad I asked it. Let's take a look. When the vote is taken and counted, the chair announces the result by saying, for example, there are 21 in the affirmative and 20 in the negative. The affirmative has it, and the motion is adopted. If the chair wants to vote against the motion, which is in order here, the chair would instead say, there are 21 in the affirmative and 20 in the negative. The chair votes in the negative, making 21 in the affirmative and 21 in the negative, so that there is less than a majority in the affirmative and the motion is lost. Just for completeness, let's look at a situation where the chair votes in the affirmative. In such a case, the chair would say, for example, there are 15 in the affirmative and 15 in the negative. The chair votes in the affirmative, making it 16 in the affirmative and 15 in the negative, so that the affirmative has it and the motion is adopted. So you might be wondering, what's the big deal? Why is it so important for the chair to only vote when his vote would affect the outcome? Well, the chair has a duty to preserve the appearance of impartiality while presiding, and this is significant in a meeting. Members simply have more confidence and comfort to freely speak their minds in debate and to make motions when they feel the chair is maintaining neutrality while presiding. This is why the chair does not speak in debate and does not vote unless his vote would affect the outcome. I'm making a video on when and how the chair can speak in debate and whether that's even a good idea. When that video is ready, I'll put a link down in the description below. Now, some people still hold to the idea that the chair somehow loses the right to vote by not being able to vote on every motion. This is simply not the case. Adding your vote to a motion without changing the outcome doesn't do anything. So preventing you from voting when your vote wouldn't do anything is not an infringement on your rights. Please don't be the chair who wastes the assembly's time by saying, there are 51 votes in the affirmative and 6 votes in the negative. The chair votes in the affirmative, making the total 52 in the affirmative and 6 in the negative, so that the affirmative has it and the motion is adopted. This makes no sense and will clearly be seen as a waste of time. If you're still not convinced that your rights are not being infringed by this rule, consider that the most common way to take a vote in a meeting is by a voice vote, where the chair says, those in favor say aye, and listens to the response, and then says, those opposed say no, and listens to the response. In this type of vote, the chair never votes. The chair simply listens to see which side is louder. If one side is clearly louder, the chair announces the result and moves on. Only if it's too close to tell is the vote retaken and counted, and only then does the chair have the opportunity to cast a vote. So we see that with most votes, the chair never has a practical opportunity to vote, and that's fine because his vote wouldn't make a difference anyway, unless it was close enough to be counted. So in this way, the chair can preside over countless votes, pun intended, without ever showing partiality. And when you do count the votes, you know whether the chair's vote would affect the outcome or not, and it's simply a waste of time for the chair to throw another vote on the pile if it has no effect. Now, there is a case when the vote is nowhere near a tie, but the chair can still vote. This happens when a 2/3 vote is required to adopt the motion. Let's say there are 20 votes in favor and 10 votes against, with a 2/3 vote required for adoption. This is not a tie, and the chair's vote could not make it a tie. But can the chair vote? Well, first, let's ask what would be the result of this vote the way it stands now. This motion would be adopted because there are twice as many in favor. So can the chair vote here? Let's see. If the chair voted in favor, it would still be adopted. It would not affect the result, so the chair could not vote in favor of the motion. However, if the chair wants to vote against the motion, making it 20-11, it would fall short of the 2/3 vote requirement, and the motion would be lost. Since this affects the result, the chair can vote against the motion. Now, at the front of the video, I mentioned 2 situations where the chair can always vote right along with other members, regardless of how close the vote is. Let's cover those now. First is the case of small boards and committees. In a small board or in a committee of any size, the rules are a bit different. Robert's Rules of Order has a set of rules that apply only to small boards and committees. And these rules are modifications of the regular rules. Robert's Rules of Order explains, in a board meeting where there are not more than about a dozen members present, some of the formality that is necessary in a large assembly would hinder business. The rules governing such meetings are different from the rules that hold in other assemblies in the following respects. Robert's Rules of Order then goes on to list 7 rules for small boards and committees. Rule number 7 provides, if the chairman is a member, he may, without leaving the chair, speak in informal discussions and in debate, and vote on all questions. In small boards and in committees, the chair is not bound by the duty of remaining impartial. In fact, in small boards and in committees, the chair is often the most active participant. The other situation where the chair can always vote, if he's a member of the assembly, is when the vote is by ballot, since a ballot vote does not disclose how a member voted. Robert's Rules of Order provides the following. If the presiding officer is a member of the assembly, he can vote as any other member when the vote is by ballot. Let me know in the comments if this has been helpful, and let me know if you have any additional questions or if there are any other topics you'd like for me to cover. And be sure to check out the description below for links to other videos. Thanks for watching.